Welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is February 27th, 2018. The diet is in session, and as we predicted, the death of 1,000 cuts, the Prime Minister is being attacked, this time because the Labor Ministry provided data that was really not compatible with what they were promoting.
The Health, Labor and Welfare Ministry was charged with providing information about Japan's working hours and how much Japanese work in order to set the stage and prepare for the passage of legislation that allows for what they call reform, in other words, deregulation of many of the aspects many of the laws that protect workers, protect employees from being fired, from being reassigned.
Right.
Basically, this was in order to establish how people actually work and what needs to be changed.
Right, this tension that's always going on between management and labor. And within the Japanese economy, labor is very well organized. There are lots of unions that represent the labor's interests. And the kind of argument here is a lot of people are dying, they're killing themselves from overwork, and the government needs to step in and do something about it.
When you say that there's big unions, there are big unions, and certainly the Keidanren, the Association of Management, has to deal with Rengo, which is a major, about 10 million member organization of various labor unions, mostly having to do with manufacturing. And that there is a bit of a contest. But one should be very careful when talking about Japanese labor and Japanese management. Very often, the members of labor unions are white-collar management types. They look just like management.
The lines are blurred.
Yes, and it's certainly not. It's not. The oppressed workers versus the extremely rich bosses. The bosses aren't terribly rich. They're well paid. They're not terribly rich, and the workers, many of them, they look very similar, and so they do have a great number of similarities. And in many ways, you could say that the labor movement is part and parcel of management. It's a part of that famous Japanese way of management, that there is actually not that antagonism between the two, so that we don't have strikes very often.
Well, they wait until the spring offensive.
No, the spring offensive, and the spring offensive is, I've said many times, it's not the spring offensive, it's the spring inoffensive.
Right.
Because the demands are so small and the rewards that they get are so small.
Last year, they just eked out just a little bit for employees. It was almost embarrassing.
$15 per month more for every employee. That was part of the wage negotiations in most industries. Some got a little more in others, and some got nothing. And in fact, there's one of my friends actually does a very careful look at corporations that are associates of Abe, where people who golf with Abe and are friends with Abe and their companies, and they are the worst. Actually, in terms of remunerating and giving raises. It's a very funny situation where the government, on one hand, is saying, you must raise the wages, and Abe can't even get his own friends to do so.
Right, and one of the biggest criticisms is that the Japanese corporations are hoarding cash. They have made profit, and they're holding it inside rather than distributing it to their workers, maybe raising the wages.
Or even giving money to stockholders,
right.
in some way, though there have been recently more often stock buybacks. But nevertheless, you're right, that cash hoarding aspect of it is what makes it so fraught politically. Because if indeed corporations gain the ability to fire more easily, that would look like the managers are just trying to accrue more money to themselves. They want to get rid of these employees they don't want anymore, employees that they don't need anymore, and instead take even more of the profits for themselves. And if I were a member of the stock-owning class, or if I were a stockholder, I would be opposed to this labor reform legislation because, dang it, the management already is holding on to this money, and now they're going to get rid of the workers that are the source of the wealth of the company.
Yeah, how about some dividends, guys?
Yeah, let's see some cash.
Right.
If you're going to get this right, you better be able to send us some cash along with it. And there's no provisions for that to happen. So this is a tough sell in terms of atmospherics for the government. Now, it's very much demanded by foreign investors and foreign companies because they have always seen Japan's labor laws as shackles that, on the one hand, prevent them from maximizing their investments. If they're invested in Japanese corporations, they ask, well, why can't you get rid of these deadbeat workers? Well, Japan's labor laws don't allow us to do it.
Or why
can't we hire this person and not give them a permanent position? We just want them for a short amount of time. We'll pay them extra. And they say, no, that's not the way it works in the system here. You have to play by the rules. They've always been, and the international press, of course, reflects those values, and so has always been extremely critical of Japan's labor laws. Luckily, they don't get to vote, but nevertheless, they are a big noise machine in favor of these so-called reforms. Now, it's really important to understand on a cultural basis, and I know that's tricky and dangerous. What a permanent position is. First of all, there are two kinds of jobs you can have: part-time, non-permanent, or permanent. And everybody wants to be a permanent position. It's almost impossible to fire you. True.
And once you get it, you don't want to give it up. You don't want to jump ship and join somebody else, some fly-by-night foreign company that's selling pharmaceuticals.
That's right, or whatever it is. You don't want it does,
which is not fly-by-night.
Yeah, but it does affect recruitment especially for foreign companies, that they can't poach people because no one wants to leave this beautiful permanent position. But that's because they're looking at it incorrectly. They're looking at it as a job, or even as a career. But a Japanese permanent employment position is neither. It's not a job. It's not a career.
No, it's a myth.
It's an asset. It's like someone's bank account. It's like someone's house. You're asking for the right to be able to take someone's house away from them, to take someone's bank account away from them. That's what labor reform law represents inside Japanese life. And you can see that in terms of behavior. An employee with a permanent position can apply for a bank loan. If you don't have a permanent position and go to a bank and say, I have this kind of income, they say, that's very nice, but we'd like to see the exact cash amount, the tampo, exact cash amount of the loan that you have on your person. So bring in a suitcase of money,
thanks a lot,
show it to us, and then we will give you
the same amount.
They'll give you the same amount and no more. Not the case with a permanent position. You can borrow money from a bank based on the reputation of your company and the fact you are employed by them in a permanent position. Touching that has always been the third rail of Japanese politics. And foreign observers have never really appreciated, because they have always said, well, these people need to work on their careers. They need to jump from company to company. They need to have flexibility. They have to have new experiences. These laws are bad for the workers. It comes with that rhetoric. Not seen from the Japanese point of view.
Well, also, as technology advances, you don't need the same number of people to turn out the same amount of product as you did 15, 20 years ago. So yes, labor is getting crunched because they need to skill up in an industry that perhaps is shrinking as far as human labor is concerned. So there's a double crunch.
The answer to that should be, well, if the workers are going to be exposed, management needs to be exposed too. And management is not exposed.
That's right.
Management does not ever have to show a profit. Management does not ever have to show how it expends its money because there is simply no shareholder leverage on any corporation of any size. The shareholders are there, they're largely passive. If they try to become activist, the establishment closes up against them and shoves them out and pays them their green mail, and they go. That's the social justice argument. If the workers have to take a hit, so does management, and there's nothing in the bill that has anything about that. Now, in order to bring it back, what has happened is that the data that the Kosei Rodosho, the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, has provided was the time bomb. The opposite parties looked at it and said, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is not true, this is absolutely not true, and going for not just 10, 20, 50, but hundreds of errors inside this data set that is supposed to be the justification of these labor reform legislation, these new laws that are coming up for a vote. And the opposition says, the data's wrong, so you cannot have this bill pass.
Right. And is this just sloppy bookkeeping, or is it this actually just trying, like in other instances we know of, where there's actually the deft hand of somebody trying to manipulate this so that we can just bamboozle everyone?
Both may be the case, and it really doesn't matter for the opposition parties.
They'll ride it.
They'll ride it for whatever it's worth, and it has made, at least this week, the Prime Minister look like a stumbling, bumbling fool.
Right.
Because he's had to say, data, blah, 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 and you say,
right.
Okay, I know you're not well briefed on this by your handlers.
This came as a surprise, didn't it?
Yeah, no one saw this coming.
Right.
But then again, no one expected that the ministry would get things so completely wrong. That's not something that you assume. And we should talk sometime about the competence of the bureaucracy and the assumptions that everyone makes.
Oh, well, that sounds like an episode for Japanese Politics 101.
Let's do it sometime.
Let's do it today. Labor reform law is being challenged as we speak. Please stay tuned, because this one's not going away.